Hello viewers, today we are going to discuss the topic on energy in human nutrition, energy balance, assessment of energy requirements, deficiency and excess. When we use the word energy, we are talking about different types of energies: solar, electric, mechanical, thermal, etc. But in human nutrition, when we use the word energy, we are talking about the ability or the capacity to do work. Now, the energy within the chemical constituents of the food which is trapped needs to be released either in the form of heat so that the body moves. Hence, in nutrition, we are talking about chemical energy, which is typically the ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and also alcohol are the main sources of energy. However, water, minerals, and vitamins play an essential role in metabolism, though they do not directly provide any energy. The units of energy have been conventionally used or expressed in kilocalories. 1 kilocalorie is defined as the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of water from 1 degree centigrade, that is from 14.5 degrees centigrade to 15.5 degrees centigrade at normal atmospheric pressure. However, with the international system of units, kilocalorie has been now replaced with joules. Measurement of energy then is equal to 1 kg of mass by 1 meter, which requires a force of 1 Newton, and that the energy required for this work is equal to 4.18 joules as 1 kilocalorie. Then when we look into the terms of energy requirement, it is that level of energy from food which balances both the intake as well as the expenditure. We take into account the body size, the body composition, the level of physical activity, and this should take care of the long-term good health of the individual. This also very important because the economical activity should be continued and the socially desirable physical activity has to be taken into account. In children, the energy has to be taken into account for growth and development, and during pregnancy, the deposition of tissues is also very important, which calls for extra energy. Similarly, during lactation, there is secretion of milk and some amount of energy is required so that the mother and child both maintain good health. The energy released from foods can be expressed both by direct and indirect calorimetry. Bomb calorimeter is the conventional method to calculate the energy value of foods. Atwater and Rosa respiration calorimeter is used to calculate energy expenditure during BMR or resting energy expenditure or even at light activity. This is a rough diagram for you all to have a look at how a bomb calorimeter looks like. A small sample of food is ignited and there is a direct recording of the heat that is released, and then we know the calorific values of the food. This is what we call as the direct calorimetry. In indirect calorimetry, we do not take into account the rise in temperature or the energy released. It is predominantly the ratio of oxygen utilized and the carbon dioxide released. The different methods that are used are Benedict's oxycalorimeter. This is used to calculate the energy value of foods. Benedict-Roth respiration apparatus helps in determining the BMR. The other are Douglas bag, Cofrane-Michaelis respirometer, Oxylog, Cost K2 respirometer. These help in calculating the energy expenditure. Just to give you an example, this is how a Douglas bag looks like. An individual breathes in air, breathes out air, and we calculate the oxygen consumed and the carbon dioxide release. This is an indirect way of assessing the energy expenditure. But the bomb calorimeter or this direct calorimetry will give you the actual energy that is released. But In reality, the energy that is available from the body from a given nutrient is a little less, and this is what is expressed as physiological fuel value. For example, the heat of combustion from carbohydrates is 4.15 calories, but in reality, the energy that is available from carbohydrates is only 4 kilocalories. Similarly, if we look at fat, the heat of combustion is 9.45 and the available calorific value is only 9 calories. For proteins, it is the maximum because the heat of combustion, though it is 5.65 calories, the energy available is only 4 calories because here the nitrogen component of the protein does not allow total combustion. So this is what we call as the coefficient of digestibility, and that is why once we look at the physiological fuel value, the net available energy per gram of these nutrients is, for carbohydrates and proteins, it is 4 calories per gram, but for fats it is 9 calories per gram. So just to give you an example of these energy values of different types of foods, let us just have a look at it. Oil and ghee give us maximum energy because it is only lipids. They give us 900 calories per 100 grams of edible portion. Cereals and pulses put together give anywhere in the range of 325 to 350 calories per 100 grams. Sugar is pure carbohydrate. It will give you 400 calories per 100 grams. Dry coconut, groundnuts, all nuts and oil seeds will give in the range of 550 to 650 calories. Eggs, 100 grams will give you 173 calories. One egg is roughly 50 grams, so this value is for 2 eggs that get consumed. Now let us look at how we are going to estimate the energy requirements. There's one thing we should remember, that generally we look at the energy requirement in terms of energy that is expended and not in terms of the energy that is consumed. There are 3 major components as far as energy requirements are concerned. One is BMR, second is the thermic effect of food, and the third one is the physical level of activity. Now let us look in detail into these 3 major components which help in estimating the energy requirements of the individuals. The first one is the BMR, or the basal metabolic rate. It is the amount of energy that is required to carry on the involuntary work of the body. For example, kidneys are functioning, lungs are doing their breathing job or the respiratory work, the GIT is doing the peristalsis, and this is what is called as involuntary work. So even when an individual is sleeping, some amount of energy is required for this work, and this is what we call as the basal metabolic rate. This constitutes roughly about 45 to 70% of the energy requirement. But then there are multiple factors which influence the BMR. The most important one, the first one, is the body composition. When we talk about body composition, we are looking into 2 aspects: the amount of adipose tissue, and the second one, the lean muscle mass. Muscle mass is an active tissue, so a person who is more muscular will have a higher BMR. Adipose tissue does not show much of activity, and that is why a fat or an obese individual will have a lower BMR. Gender, the second factor, females. All ladies generally have a low BMR because of, again, the higher adipose tissue component that is present. Then age. When children are growing, the BMR is high because there is growth and development that is taking place. So even when a child sleeps, cells are multiplying and growing, and that is why the BMR is up. But then after the age of 35, when the activity comes down, the BMR also starts dropping. Another important factor which influences BMR is the body size and the surface area. A taller, broader individual will have a larger surface area. When the surface area is large, it means that is lost from the body, from the skin is more, and this will be less in a shorter person because the surface area is small. The next important aspect is sleep. When we talk about sleep, we are talking about no voluntary work is going on, and that is why BMR during sleep will be more. Body temperature. Body temperature is an important component because when temperatures are high, body struggles to maintain the body temperature low. Similarly, when the temperatures are low, body again is trying to struggle and maintain the body temperature. Now, under these conditions, BMR will definitely change. Another important aspect is the endocrine glands. Now, for example, thyroid gland, which secretes thyroxine hormones, is a master endocrine gland. Once the thyroxine secretions go haywire, definitely it will have a profound impact on the BMR. In hypothyroidism, the BMR decreases because thyroxine levels are low and the metabolic activities of the body decrease, and that is why BMR decreases. As against this, in hyperthyroidism, when there is excess production of thyroxine, the metabolism increases, and that is why BMR also increases. Another important point is pregnancy. In pregnancy, there is growth and development of maternal tissues as well as the growing fetus. This calls for extra energy, and that is why BMR will be more during pregnancy. Environmental temperature again plays a major role because, as we talked about body temperature, environmental temperature is again related to that. Very high or very low temperatures, body will struggle to keep it as normal as possible, and that is why BMR will fluctuate. Under disease conditions or in temperatures where there is rise in the temperature, for every degree rise in temperature, the BMR increases. It can increase anywhere up to 5%. Similarly, under conditions like AIDS, cancer, where there is massive change in the metabolic processes, definitely the BMR is also going to increase. But it is very difficult for us to actually measure BMR for each and every individual. Hence, Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR, has proposed equations whereby it is very easy for us to predict the BMR among the Indians. You just need to know the body weight and the age, and it is very easy for us to calculate the BMR of Indian men and women. So these equations, for example, for males in the age group of 18 to 30 years is calculated as 14.5 into weight plus 645, and for females in the age group of 18 to 30 years, it is 14 into weight plus 471. Similarly, ICMR has predicted the BMR for various age groups and both the sexes. The second major component which plays a major role in estimating the energy requirement is the metabolic response to food. Once we consume food, there is some amount of energy which is required for the ingestion, digestion, absorption, transport of all these nutrients. Some amount of energy that is required is called as the metabolic response to food, and there are different terms which convey the same meaning. For example, dietary induced thermogenesis, specific dynamic action of food, or the thermic effect of food. It means it is the metabolic response to the food. This roughly constitutes about 10% of the BMR, and this becomes a smaller component as far as the energy requirement is concerned. In a homogeneous population, this is more or less constant. Now, the third component is the level of physical activity. Now, this is the most variable component when we estimate the energy requirements of a group. Of course, this becomes the second largest component. BMR always remains the largest component, as we have discussed earlier. It is about 45 to 70% of our energy requirement. The second most variable would be the physical activity. Definitely thermic effect of food, the least one, is about 10%. So coming back again to physical activity, there are two types of activities which are defined. The one is obligatory, which an individual has to do. This can be your occupational work, your daily activities such as going to school, attending household work, taking care of the family, taking care of the demands of the children, and adults who indulge in economic, social, or cultural activities. Discretionary activities are where an individual spends energy for health, well-being, and having a better quality of life. Now, if we look at the level or the type of physical activity, they are generally classified under three components: sedentary, moderate, and heavy. As the name suggests, sedentary activity means occupations which do not require physical effort, where we spend most of the time sitting, for example, watching television, using computers like in office executives, or today when we typically look at the IT sector, where the working professionals are sitting at the table and doing the work. The second category is the moderate one, where the occupation demands a little more energy and expenditure, or it could be sedentary occupation, but the individuals do indulge in vigorous activity like jogging, cycling, swimming, etc. Now, heavy one is where the occupations or the activity demands strenuous work. It could be like dancers, professional swimmers, agriculture laborers, mine workers, or even athletes who indulge in very heavy activity like football, hockey, where the energy expenditure by virtue of their profession is very high. So there are other factors also which influence the energy requirement. What we just now talked about are the adults where the growth has stopped, or the women who come under the category of non-pregnant, non-lactating. But energy requirement has to take into account these three factors. The first one is the growth, that is the energy that is required for the formation of new tissue, and also the energy which is deposited in this tissue. Now, this is what we typically see in children up to 18 years. Right from birth, infancy, preschoolers, adolescents, they all come under the category of growth where energy is required for the formation of the growth tissue. Another important variable is the pregnancy, where we talk about women in the reproductive ages, and here energy is required for primarily the growth of the fetus, and definitely as far as the mother is concerned, energy is required for the formation of placenta and various other maternal tissues. Another third important component becomes lactation. Energy cost of lactation has two major components. One, the energy content of the milk that is secreted, and the energy that is required to produce that milk for the infant. So if we look at it, it is just the energy requirement for adults. We are going to look at the BMR, the thermic effect of food, and the level of physical activity. But there are other groups where there will be additional component of growth as in children and pregnancy in lactation. Then let us just look at the energy cost of some of the activities in terms of BMR units. These are again given by either FAO, WHO, or they are being modified by ICMR to suit the Indians. Now, for example, we take a simple activity like sitting quietly. Now, the energy cost in terms of BMR units is 1.2. You take that you are standing and doing lab work, which is such a common activity for students who are pursuing science. For them, the energy cost in terms of BMR units would be 2. Farmers who are indulging in activities like harvesting, they will require 3.6. And walking at the rate of 3 miles per hour, it could be 3.71. So we look at it as the activity or the energy expended is less, the energy cost in terms of BMR units is also going to be very less. Now, if we look at the energy requirements, we have till now looked into the components which form or the basis for energy requirements, which are defined as the recommended dietary allowances. These are based on the Indian reference man and reference woman. The baseline is the values that are given by FAO, WHO, and modified by ICMR to suit the Indians. Now we have to remember one thing, that none of us fit exactly into the definition of a reference man and a reference woman, but these are the guidelines for us so that we can estimate our energy requirements. So let us look into the definition of reference man. Reference man is between 18 and 29 years of age. Now this is very important. We cannot have a reference man below 18 years because that is still the growth period. After 29 years, 30 years, the BMR starts dropping. So this is very important that we define that he is between 18 and 29 years of age. He weighs 60 kgs. He has a height of 1.73 meters with a BMI of 20.3 kg per meter square. He is free from disease. He is physically fit for active work. He is employed for 8 hours in occupation and 8 hours in bed. And that is what medical science tells us, that we should catch up with the sleep for 8 hours. He indulges in 4 to 6 hours of sitting, moving around, and 2 to 4 hours for recreation or household activities. Now let us look into the definition of a reference woman. She is between 18 and 29 years of age, non-pregnant and non-lactating. This is very important because during pregnancy and lactation, BMR increases and even energy requirements. She weighs 55 kgs, has a height of 1.61 meters with a BMI of 21.1 kg meter square, free from disease, physically fit for active work, employed for 8 hours in occupation. She spends 8 hours in bed, 4 to 6 hours sitting and moving around, and 2 to 4 hours in recreation and household duties. And for children, body weights of well-nourished, healthy children with normal growth are taken as a reference standard for body weight. So let us look into the recommended dietary allowances of energy as given by ICMR in 2010. They were revised in 2010 and these are the latest values which we are supposed to use them. So we classify man, women under category of sedentary, moderate and heavy work, and subsequently given here are the energy requirements per day. For example, a sedentary man requires 2320 kilocalories, but a man with heavy work requires 3490 calories. A woman with sedentary work requires 1900 calories, while a heavy worker requires 2850 calories. Then, as told earlier, during pregnancy and lactation, the energy requirement increases. So whatever is the basic requirement, during pregnancy we add another 350 calories. Similarly, lactation, the first 6 months of lactation, we add another 600 calories to the values, and in the next 6 months we add 520 calories, because in the next 6 months milk production decreases and also the child would have started consuming other foods. Infancy, we give it per kg body weight because children are growing, and that is why during that period we give it as per kg body weight and not for the year. Children 1 to 3060, 7 to 960, 90 calories. Similarly, because when boys and girls are in the age group of 10 to 18, the adolescent spurt starts, and that is why we start differentiating as boys and girls when we specify the energy requirement. And as you see, as they reach 16 to 18 years, boys require more energy and girls require less energy. One thing that we must always remember, that the dietary intake could be safely recommended for a population group is the estimated average energy requirement of that group. We will not give any extra allowance for energy as compared to the other nutrients. Now, within certain limits, body has the capacity to make adjustments whenever we eat less or whenever we eat more. But sometimes these energy adjustments go a little haywire and they cause two major problems of both obesity as well as undernutrition. For most nutrients, as I have been telling you, excess of intake should not be a problem. In fact, when we describe the requirements, we do give it as plus or minus 2 standard deviation. But this approach cannot be applied for energy, because if one individual goes on consuming excess energy, he will first become overweight and then he will become obese, which is not a very desirable phenomenon. Now, if we look at the intake, we generally look at it this way, that the food that we consume is determined by hunger, which is a reaction to hypothalamus, and it is again determined by leptin and the ghrelin hormones. Energy expenditure, as we had already discussed, is related to the basal metabolic rate and also to the physical level of activity. But when we define energy requirements, we take into account the expenditure and not the intake. Now, the next component is the energy balance, that is the positive energy balance or the negative energy balance. Generally, body tries to maintain an energy balance with respect to an intake and expenditure. But when the energy intake is higher than what is being expended, then it becomes a positive balance. But when the intake is less than what is expended, then it becomes a negative balance, and both become a matter of concern. Now, when we look at energy excess or obesity, one of the major causes of energy excess is overeating. That is when we have wrong choices of food. There is too much of fat, carbohydrate, sugar in the diet with very little fruit, vegetable or fiber in the diet. A very sedentary lifestyle. Of course, there is genetic influence. Obese parents will definitely have some component or some role that is to play as far as children becoming obese. Hormonal disturbances, like we gave an example of thyroid, or even in young girls when we have the problem of polycystic ovarian disease. Then certain medications like antidepressants can make an individual put on weight. Lack of sleep again could be one of the major causes for putting on weight. Simple arithmetic, when you are sleeping for fewer hours, you end up eating one extra meal in the day. There are multiple complications that are associated with overweight, like increased levels of triglycerides, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, metabolic syndrome, heart diseases, stroke, cancers. There can be breathing disorders, sleep apnea, snoring. It has become a major problem these days because of obesity. There could be gynecological problems and even osteoarthritis. As against this, we are talking about negative balance or deficiency, where we are talking about conditions could be medical or could be genuine problem, like when there is no food available. Of course, chronic or severe undernutrition has always remained a matter of concern, and that is what is the Indian paradox. At one end we have obese individuals, at the other end we have undernourished children. When we are talking about undernourishment, it is always associated with decreased physical and mental growth, suppressed immunity, increased morbidity and mortality, lowered productivity, and therefore the decreased life expectancy. There are multiple reasons: population explosion, lack of education, cultural influences, or it could be even because of food scarcity, like in natural or man-made calamities like wars. Also, it could be due to any underlying disease, or sometimes because of the disease condition, the person may not be able to consume enough food. So, or it could be even when there is a parasitic infection. The person might be eating normal food, but the parasitic infection is also eating the food that you are eating. So that is the reason why starvation can cause, where the energy intake may not be equal to the energy expended. So, in conclusion, we can say that more than the intake, the energy expenditure needs to be taken into account when we are defining energy requirements. Then the energy requirement of an individual depends upon BMR, the thermic effect of food, and definitely the level of physical activity. Reference man and reference women serve as a guideline to define energy requirement of an individual or for a group. Then the major message that we need to take in is we need to have a balanced meal with at least 3 of the 5 food groups in the 3 major meals, and we must indulge in some kind of physical exercise. Thank you.